Macho Man vs. Kool-Aid Man, a joke episode. Let's look at all the joke episodes. This really won't be taking very long. I'm excluding Starscream vs. Rainbow Dash on the off chance Galactus vs. Unicron happens, and also because Transformers is a very important series to me, I'd rather dedicate its own review to the Transformers episodes. And Red vs. Blue, if you count it, I've already talked about, and it remains as just the most middling thing ever. Or Deadpool vs. Pinkie Pie, which I'm going to drop the score for because on rewatch it's even, God, it's rough. Biffweed is doing his own review of this episode. You can go check that out, hopefully around the same time as this comes out. Let's just get to the good stuff. Come on.
Oh, okay. A teensy bit less climactic than I thought it was going to be.
That's right, Boomstick.
Well, okay, not sure if that's what I meant. Well, Goomba vs. Koopa sure is an episode, and credit where it's due, it's far from the least funny joke episode in Season 1. It has some good jokes, like with this obvious lie about dissecting a voluntary Goomba, which I found funny, and I like a lot of Boomstick's jokes, and of course, Wiz says that's right, Boomstick. Though there's also the weird Koopa shell thing where they say it only takes Mario one hit to kill a Koopa, leaving behind a shell, and also that they're still alive after being stomped later, which I get what they mean. They're saying that Mario only needs one hit to kill them, but when he jumps on them, he's not actually hitting them, he's hitting the shell and making them cower, so Mario needs one hit on the Koopa itself, but can't kill through the shell. It's just really badly worded. And the fight is... it's fine. The music choice really carries it for me, because what happens in the fight is... it's okay. It's about what you'd get for the matchup when you don't have Origin the PogChamp at the helm. There's some good comedic timing, some funny moments, and stuff like that. The bit where they fly up the Bullet Bill section is a little bit too long for me, and of course it has the Red Sussy voice in it. Yeah, that's about it. This episode gives me nothing to talk about really. 6 out of 10 for at least being fun. This episode is cyberbullying, and for that, I really don't think it deserves any time for any sort of serious review. This episode comes off as nothing but mean-spirited spite towards two people who really just made some bad music. It seems especially cool of Rebecca Black accusing her of having ADHD. It's just a cruel video. It relentlessly mocks the two and goes all in on making fun of them, and this seems especially wrong in light of Rebecca Black's history with all the bullying that took place on the internet. It ruined her life for a long time. The impact of mocking what at the time was a 13-year-old was very real, and she never did anything wrong. Now sure, we will never know how much impact this death battle may have had, but in spite of this disclaimer, the 11 million views makes me think there had to be at least a few people who saw this episode and went on to get in on the relentless mocking of these two. And it feels unnecessary. This is the only episode of Death Battle that could have potentially caused real, genuine harm to someone. And no matter how small that harm may have been, it matters. I can speak from experience. Every little thing a victim of bullying receives adds up. It adds up. There's not just little things that get forgotten about. That all adds up. This is not an episode of Death Battle. In spite of what the yet unedited title would tell you, it is a cruel, disgusting, and insulting product that the people behind it rightfully should never look back on with anything but contempt. Less than a 0 out of 10. It has no redeeming qualities. I don't care if anyone thinks a joke was funny or a delivery was good, because the intention of the whole project was to mock two people who didn't deserve it. Two real-life, existing, human beings. And also, the animation looks like it was done by a 5-year-old and edited by a 3-year-old, both of which who were asleep during the production.
Good lord, nothing can stop this killing machine! Well, except maybe one thing. Chuck Norris!
On the other hand, this is a great episode. And we shall be ignoring the Chuck Norris controversies because this came out before those existed, so I'm not going to criticize them for glorifying Chuck Norris because, well, this was before all the reasons we had to not do that. The analysis does exactly what I'd want. It doesn't try to make things lol meme funny, it knows that just taking the characters entirely seriously is the funniest route to go with, and it is. The rapid-fire listing of their absurd feats, the sheer leaps in logic they make completely unironically, just with complete seriousness to explain things like their reasoning for Chuck's movies and cartoons all being canon and usable, or Segata somehow being exempt from the laws of physics by for some reason needing to calculate that a pane of glass could not survive the kinetic energy of a missile, and just the general pacing of the analysis is basically perfect. I love how both analysis sections start with references to ancient Asian legends, ending with them bringing up shortcomings and then immediately rescinding them as well. Overall, I just really like it. Editing, voice acting for Wiz and Boomstick, writing, it's all gold. But the fight, oh man, the fight is incredible. It's not like I need to go super in depth to explain why though. The animation, in a vacuum, is fantastic. It's very smooth, the rigging is all really solid, effects are on point, the sprites match well enough, and both the animation and especially the sound design sell the impact of every individual punch and kick. Arguably one of the best examples being Chuck's 5-hit combo on Segata and the following double explosion judo throw. And of course, that leads into the simply amazing usage of the character's most absurd feats, primarily from Chuck's side, but Segata has some great moments too. It's nothing against Segata either, it's just that Chuck's are referencing specific facts, while Segata is just some common abilities. But the inclusion of Giant Segata, the Segata Clone Army, and most importantly, the double explosion with the judo throw, they're all gold. But there's something just magical about them, including the third fist under the beard, having Chuck run so fast he hits Segata before his own after image vanishes, and probably, I don't know, my favorite is just him doing a push-up to launch half the earth at Segata. It's all just great. Especially because for the most part, we don't have visual references for these abilities, these are just facts written in text, but having them actually visualized is just great. And hell, while it doesn't reference any specific scenes from the Sega Saturn commercials, I love Segata weaponizing Saturn's rings. You know, because Sega Saturn. But the best part of this fight is its escalation. It knows how to do escalation. Let's go bit by bit. The first scene we get is just set up. Simple enough, Chuck is watching Delta Force, his own show, and then sees a bunch of commercials for the Sega Saturn that he changes channels to avoid until Segata, complete with giant Sega Saturn, jumps out of the television to force Chuck to play Sega Saturn. There's some decent rigging as Chuck crushes the giant Saturn in his bare hands, and the fight immediately begins with some really high impact punches. I do like as well that Segata's opening move was to try to land the judo throw on Chuck. Chuck busts out the machine gun, pretty simple, but Segata just standing there and taking it as a sheer show of manliness is awesome. But that was all pretty utilitarian, right? Just some punches and a machine gun. Let's move on, let's step things up a bit. The next thing we get is Segata throwing a fucking tree at Chuck, wiping out his house, leading to the 5-hit combo with the chin uppercut and the around the world punch, which wipes out the surrounding forest, and then comes Segata's throw, which takes out the top of an entire mountain. We take a break from sheer destruction after that and go back to just some fighting, which in spite of going down in scale, doesn't feel any less impactful, as Segata's army bounced Chuck all over the place. Which then leads to Chuck kicking the giant Segata into the ground so hard he flies through the earth, splitting it in half and lands on the moon. This is where Chuck does his push-up and launches half of the entire fucking planet at Segata, flinging him all the way to Saturn. Though not to be outdone, Segata does just punch the half of the planet that he's attached to away. Now that we've reached a planetary scale, what else can we do but have Segata throw the rings of Saturn through Mars, into Chuck, through Venus and Mercury, and finally through the goddamn sun. This causes a fucking supernova that tears a hole through space-time, leading to an epic final clash between Chuck's foot and Segata's fist that destroys the entire universe and creates a constellation of their fight that continues to appear in later episodes, appearing in every following season except for 3 and 6. Wow, it's a fantastic feeling of escalation, that the characters get more and more absurd and never once look like it's a struggle for them. It really feels like someone was really passionate about this matchup, this fight, and just selling everything that was happening. It feels like a passion project, and I love that more than anything else. When I can feel the love for a matchup, the characters, and most importantly, the animation they're making, and I can feel that someone, when writing this fight, like they were talking about what to do, and they were just having fun, throwing out ideas and going, yeah, that's a great idea, let's add that. I love seeing that sort of thing worked into a cohesive animation. And there's a lot of fun little tidbits, like the sound that plays when Chuck hits Segata with the third fist, Segata riding an asteroid like a car, and the episodes of past and even a future death battle appearing briefly during their final clash. It also amuses me that the hosts don't seem particularly surprised by this being the result of that battle. Unfortunately though, even this episode doesn't quite check every box. It breaks the 180 rule when Chuck kicks Segata out the right side of the building and the next shot has him flying out the left. It has Chuck go do a push-up on the right side of the planet but throws the left side of it. Along with that, it does feel maybe a little more could have been done, I don't know. I've always felt the ending felt just a bit abrupt, but then it fits the tone and it is what they were going for, so I guess it's fine. But mostly there are some of those smaller issues that hold it back, and the fact that it doesn't have much of a conclusion where they actually compare the two. I think it could have been funny if Wiz tried to compare them, but Boomstick just kept shutting down his attempts, I don't know. Regardless, this is a 9 out of 10. A phenomenal episode and easily one of the best joke episodes we've ever gotten.
Remember, kids, destroy the imposter!
This episode sure does exist, and honestly, it is a little better than I remember. But not the fight. I actually just really enjoyed the analysis with this episode. I don't know, I enjoyed Smokey's in particular. I thought the analysis of the real-life attributes of bears was really cool, as someone who really loves nature and animals and loves hearing that being talked about. I watched Weiju Mediat and Burrow Doggos. Them talking about the actual real mascot that existed in reality, and I especially love the bear pun off at the end. I think it's just a nice character moment that's also funny, where Wiz actually humours Boomstick and plays into the puns. And I find the Ursa pun and the following bit of banter between them full of character and just really funny. McGruff's is also good. It has its moments, and I like when they talk about sillier things, and I always like when they talk silly things and have the coasters have to cope with that. I also like the fact that they criticize one of McGruff's commercials and actually use that criticism as an example of his limitations, because it's not mean-spirited towards McGruff, and it is an alarming thing that McGruff didn't do anything in this situation. Unfortunately, I just don't find the fight very fun. It has its moments. For instance, I like including the respect bubble and the monster truck, and I like that McGruff doesn't do anything when he stops time, as that is representing the research, and I like the voice acting, that's really solid. The animation overall is... it sure is their first hand-drawn episode. I mean, it's not the worst looking hand-drawn animation they've done. After all, it doesn't feel like a Family Guy cutaway gag like Mario vs Sonic 2 did, and it doesn't have as many generally awful looking bits like Jonas vs War Machine. But it also isn't Jack vs Afro, and as we know, that means it's not spectacular. The sound design is fittingly cartoony, which I can live with, I guess, but what actually happens it's just boring. Like, for one thing, McGruff gets dominated the entire fight, and his only advantage comes right at the end where he uses his monster truck, which lasts all of 15 seconds before McGruff just, gets squashed. And it also just feels like nothing is happening, partially because the fight itself isn't even 2 minutes long, and most of the fight is made of McGruff getting slapped around. I mean, Smokey doesn't even stop time once. You'd think they could have both stop time at least. Legitimately, the whole fight is McGruff and Smokey have a scrap, McGruff turns on a bubble, Smokey trips him and slaps him, McGruff drives a monster truck, and then Smokey grows big and McGruff dies. It is a non-event, and the bad thing is I really like the conclusion afterwards. I don't know, there's just something novel about them discussing how real-world animals compare, and then further into how the specifics of their powers bounce off each other. It's a conclusion where they don't go into any calcs or stats, they just talk about animals and abilities. I really want to like this episode, and I do like this episode. The analysis and conclusions are great, but a short, mediocrely animated fight with bad choreography and borderline nothing happening holds it back. I'm still willing to give it a 7, but it is a low 7.
Okay, I found your tip guy. Several, actually.
I refuse to just call this episode Macho Man vs Kool-Aid Man. It's Randy Savage vs Kool-Aid Man, or Macho Man Randy Savage vs Kool-Aid Man. But then I guess they might just want to avoid Vinnie Mac's hammer as much as possible, which that is completely understandable, he is a wanker. So what did I think of this episode? Well, this is a very different and weird episode, so I'll start with a basic summary of everything that happens before getting into dissecting it, because some of you might not have kept up. I know Biffwee didn't. The start of the episode has Wiz and Boomstick opening for an episode death battle that we will probably never know. They weren't planning on doing Randy vs Kool-Aid Man in universe, so I'd imagine they were doing something. I mean, maybe they were doing Dio vs Alucard in this, who knows. Ringmaster interrupts and says he found Boomstick stands, which we'll get to. Wiz and Boomstick go to where Ringmaster is. Camp Campbell. This is never addressed, but this is definitely the Camp Campbell location. I kind of wish something from Ruby showed up in this episode, because then we would have had Red vs Blue, Camp Death Battle, and Ruby together for this episode, but maybe that's just me. Ringmaster apparently got a sick tip, and you fucking know Liam was laughing his ass off when Jen wrote that Boomstick came here because of a tip. That his dad is here. There's actually a bit I like, where Ringmaster says that the guy was wearing red, and Wiz asks if he means the anonymous tipper or Boomstick's dad, and it turns out, yeah, both of them actually are, so Ringmaster's vagueness in that remark is actually intentional. I like that. I don't like the dramatic zoom in on Randy's crotch. This suddenly goes to them randomly analysing Randy's career and such. And I don't mind the transition of Wiz starting this because he wants to correct Boomstick asking if Randy is his dad, and the way Wiz decides to explain Randy's story and then suddenly Boomstick talks about Randy's feats is honestly kind of nice. Yes, I understand the problems with the pacing, it is super abrupt transition-wise, but in universe, this is not a scripted, fully written episode that they're reading out. In universe, this is just out of nowhere they've decided to do this. Wiz just started talking about Randy's history and going over it to explain to Boomstick, who he assumes Boomstick doesn't know, and Boomstick interrupts, showing that he does know, just to talk about how, just to hype up Randy, under the assumption Randy is his dad. Kool-Aid Man then shows up because thirst was mentioned, and I kinda like how he conjures a wall specifically to bust through it. They then talk about Kool-Aid, a very sauce! Kool-Aid Man gets talked about for a while, and we get a fun little moment where Wiz calls Jocelyn to calculate a feat, and Dummy appears after 2 episodes of absence, and then leaves. Bye. Jocelyn does the calc in SpongeBob font, then they talk about Randy in the middle of Kool-Aid's analysis, which I'm okay with, because in universe, once again, this is meant to be Boomstick interrupting to hype up his dad. I do find some hilarity though in Randy one-shot this guy, and he's fast enough to run across the planet faster than light, which has all the energy of being fast enough to dodge the super powerful Akuma's attacks. Then there's the fight. 6 minutes in. The analysis is really short, but I did enjoy it. We start the fight with Boomstick saying "Dad," lovely. Then get some pretty decent stuff before one of my least favorite shots of Kool-Aid Man very slowly and awkwardly flying through the air completely parallel to the ground. But I like the end of it where he reverses it and drop kicks Randy. Randy fires one attack with a Slim Jim and does the Hulk Hogan nuke, but this time it's the elbow drop. And at this point is where the preview stopped. For the most part, I like this. This seems like a good start for a battle that uses a ton of their abilities. Let's see what happens after the preview. So we cut to Wiz and Boomstick, just so they can talk about their abilities. Oh, it just interrupts the fight. But it is kind of funny. I don't know, I like hearing Randy and Kool-Aid Man react to what powers the analysis just happens to be bringing up them using. Honestly, I can live with this. I can live because it gets around the budget that they need to include these weird abilities, and I don't know. I just really like, oh, how this grass gets so big, and oh no, snakes. It's just amusing to me. But then we get another reference to Boomstick's dad, and Boomstick saying, oh yeah, and you ruined it. There's a fun little reference to the creation of Adam, where Kool-Aid turns a Slim Jim into Kool-Aid and looks surprised about it. I mean, is that not what you were intending to do? They then fall into the Kool-Aid dimension and pause. So what's about to happen is a scene that was animated by Luis. He's one of the big three most iconic Death Battle animators, along with Torian and Devil Artemis. He hyped up this scene big time on Twitter, and I was super excited to see it. And when I finally did, oh my god! Look at that, it's stop motion animated. Those models are great, all looks fantastic, and it was a Twitter post still. Look, I'm not going to get into the debate on if Death Battle should reveal so much before the episodes and such. I don't think they should personally, given most of the casual audience won't see it at all, and most of the dedicated audience would rather not be spoiled of things. And personally, because they revealed so much, I'm not really that excited for the rest of the season. All I want to see is the finale and Macho vs. Aizen. And while Season 7, when it did matchups I didn't like, I still had some interest in the next time, this season doesn't have that, because I already know more often than not, I won't care about the next time. It kind of sucks away the fun of the next time trailers. But some people just prefer knowing everything in advance, I guess. Some people like having the whole season, knowing everything in the season from in advance, which I really don't, personally. Like, imagine if instead of what Sakurai did with the Smash teasers, he just revealed all the characters immediately, and then still did the trailers as if it was supposed to get you hyped when you already knew who it was. But I will say, this Twitter reveal sucked away all the excitement I had for Luis's scene only a few days before the episode dropped. And the scene in general got no reaction from me. When I saw them falling, it was just, oh, this is going to the stop motion scene, right? Ah, okay. And while the scene is really well animated, it just wasn't very exciting when I already knew it was coming. And most of it is just Kool-Aid Man voring Randy so Randy can then vor him. And then Randy dies in the second most brutal way this season. Jesus Christ! And there's no blood. So this means Kool-Aid Man, before tearing open Randy's chest, shattering his ribcage and rupturing his organs, turned all of his blood into Kool-Aid! That is nasty! Maybe one of the most painful deaths they've ever done, considering Randy is still alive after the initial bursting. That would be a horrifying death. Let's talk about it. Now, as we know, Randy Poffo was a real man. He brought tons of joy and love to the world with his actions. A good person who knew when to move on from the past, and who lived in a way most people would probably admire. And they've just killed him in what, despite how they framed it, is one of the most nasty kills we've gotten recently. Only beaten out by, oh my god! I didn't mention it before, but the fact that Goku Black's unintentionally still alive at this point, fucking gold. Anyway, while they did it in silhouette and showed no visible wound on the body due to the framing, that made it worse for me. I myself use silhouettes and animation to emphasize the impact of attack. I mean, Death Battle did it themselves for Urza's death in Season 3. When using it in silhouette with the added context of what's actually happening means the viewer will create their own image, and the brutality of this death means it's likely interpreted as more brutal than what otherwise would have been shown by the viewer. And yeah, the choice to do this in silhouette made it more brutal to me, because to me, I imagined a far more nasty looking wound than what they could have ever shown. And personally, I don't like it. I think if Randy was to lose, he shouldn't have died. I know Kool-Aid Man brings him back later, but here's the thing. Randy has family, people who knew him and have lived through his tragic death. This means technically this is the second episode Death Battle have done where you could potentially see it cause genuine distress to someone, and I'm not a fan of that. And this is different to if you're some guy who was fucking distressed over Carnage's death or something and seeing him die was bad for you. That's different. Shush. Randy could have survived and admitted his defeat. In real life, Randy Poffo was the kind of person to know when he's lost, accept it, and move on with grace. One of the most admirable things about him was knowing when something was over and being able to move on from it. Or you could have had Kool-Aid Man make him tap out, a wrestling submission. They're already breaking death battle rules by having them present for the animation, meaning they get prior knowledge. The rule about death being a requirement is one they should have been willing to break, because as it is, this is probably my least favorite death in the series. Not counting that episode. That episode doesn't count. But if I'm being honest, this didn't actively bother me nearly as much as it did some. Why? Because I'm more bothered by the fact that Randy's last fucking words before dying are about Boomstick's fucking dad. And then he does the blah as if anybody found that funny in Red vs. Blue. They then immediately ignore the fact that a real dead man has just died again to focus on Boomstick's dad, and then Jocelyn and Dummy do the conclusion, which I like. I like it overall, even if I personally don't agree with the outcome, but that's not important. That's where the subjective part of versus debating comes in. I like Jocelyn and Dummy's interactions. I think it's just they make for a good pairing. I wouldn't mind if they did a sub-series about Jocelyn and Dummy. Some people are probably saying that when Wiz and Boomstick get retired, they should continue Death Battle with Jocelyn and Dummy, which... Though Boomstick saying it's horrible while hovering over Randy's corpse, then referring to his fucking dad drama is painful. Speaking of pain, the last 3 minutes of this 12-minute episode, yes, a whole quarter of the episode is about Boomstick's dad. Deadpool shows up, whoop-de-fucking-do, he doesn't overstay his welcome at least, even if his introduction was aggravating, which is admittedly perfectly consistent with Death Battle's inability to write Deadpool. Then Kool-Aid Man brings Randy back to life, which I guess was to be expected, and no, I don't think this would repair the distress his family would feel if they were to potentially see this brutal as hell death on screen, but I'm glad it happened if they were really going to kill Randy. And the friendship the combatants show at the end is actually pretty cool. I like this bit. But then Boomstick runs from Macho Man's side to over here, literally just so he can have his dramatic father moment. God, when did Boomstick become Dan Hibiki? We get Boomstick visiting this camper van, coming across his mum, there's a nice hug between them, and then what seems like it's meant to be a message about something. But Mama Boomstick saying Boomstick has two good friends when all she knows is that there are two guys there with Boomstick. I mean, sure, he could have told her about them, but we don't know that at all. That's just all headcanon. Boomstick could have... Fucking headcanon for Death Battle. Boomstick could have just... he could have told her, but we never see it, we don't know it for sure, and I guess I can buy her knowing who Ringmaster is, given he and Boomstick have history from before the show, but I don't know, this kind of feels empty. Then it cuts to Sarge, confirming still that Sarge is Boomstick's dad, and honestly, yeah, I like this bit. I like Sarge putting things together, and the constellation of Randy and Kool-Aid Man is nice, even if it doesn't feel as earned as Segata vs. Chuck. So, what do I think of the episode overall? Well, I like the presentation. The format feels fitting for a nice one-off episode, even if the sidebars look hideous and genuinely kind of discomforting to look at sometimes. The writing for the analyses is fine. Randy chiming in to hype himself up was great and perfectly in character, and I like Boomstick interrupting Wiz's hyping of Kool-Aid Man just to hype Randy. I would have preferred if that was because Boomstick was a fan of Randy instead of just because he thought Randy was his dad, but whatever. And Jocelyn being involved in a proper episode death battle is great. Even if we don't see her interacting with Ringmaster at all, I think that would have been cool. And outside of this shot being kind of weird, I think the whole fight was really well done. Animation was solid, choreography was fine, and voice acting was phenomenal. Tom Shaw's Kool-Aid Man is cool, I think it's great, yeah, good. But Anthony Sardina's, I hope that's how I'm saying it, Randy Savage voice is excellent. It is exactly what I wanted, just, yes, fantastic, love it. But of course, there feels like there was some wasted potential, in that they bring up all these cool powers and Randy doesn't get to do anything. He shoots one lightning bolt on screen and does one elbow drop that looks kinda weak because we see the impact in relation to regular people who aren't that far away. It doesn't look like a recent, like the explosion looks, if you frame it like this, the explosion looks really cool. But here it just looks small. And the stop motion bit is fantastic. And like, Kool-Aid Man, he doesn't use too many of his abilities, but he does use enough of them. He flies, he reverses time, he creates a shield, he makes something into a Slim Jim. Wait, what? No, he makes a Slim Jim into Kool-Aid. Like, and he controls Kool-Aid like fucking Kool-Aid Man does so much cool shit. Randy does not. And here, well, a few more of my problems. The fight is just very, very short, and I think the reason is because a lot of the budget had to go into the analysis and making it fully animated, including a fully animated ending bit, which I get. I respect the effort that went into making some character work and complete this Boomstick's dad arc, but it feels hollow to me. Not in terms of there being no effort or no passion, because of course there was that. There was effort and passion. But this whole ending bit feels boring and uninteresting. At no point did I ever feel like Boomstick wasn't appreciating his friends enough throughout the series. Like, sure, he dunks on Wiz a lot, but he's always shown to be on relatively good terms with him and Ringmaster, and outside of stealing Ringmaster's spotlight once in DBX, it doesn't feel like he's ever been a really ungrateful guy who has just been a douchebag. I don't know, it just feels weird that that Boomstick's mama would bring that up as if Boomstick is not recognizing how much he loves his friends. And the thing about not getting what you want better not be an underhanded attack on my reviews. I see what you're doing, Jen, person who I've talked to and has never once implied she has a problem with me and actively enjoyed my puns. I am reading way too much into this. But at the very least, I can respect what they went for. I just wasn't a fan of the execution. And it's a shame, because that's what likely took the budget away from having a fulfilling fight. Because while the fight is cool and the stop motion is great, it just doesn't feel like enough happened. And basically all the stuff that wasn't spoiled in advance was the death and a bit where Wiz and Boomstick talk during the fight. The entire first half of the fight and the reveal of the stop motion segment were spoiled, and that did take away from the experience. That is admittedly not the episode's fault, and I won't be docking points for that. But it did make it so watching the episode gave me basically no emotional response, and given WWE is one of the most special franchises to me that they've used, yeah, that's not great. This did not scratch the itch of a WWE match. I'm still very vehemently wanting Undertaker vs. The Crow. Overall, this episode was fine, but it is in my opinion dragged down by the overabundance of focus on Boomstick's family, which I just didn't care about. I'm giving it, honestly, a 6 out of 10, because it does some great stuff. Roughly half of the episode is stuff that's great, but the other half is stuff I don't like or care about, or is severely lacking in the potential that could have been used. But I have a lot of respect for this episode, because it tried something new, it tried to be unique, and I like that. It put in the effort, and while it didn't personally work for me, I'm sure it would have worked for a lot of other people. Or at least I say that, but I've seen the response. There are a lot of people who seem to have a real problem with this episode. We'll get there. And everyone who worked on this episode should be proud of what they made, because they put in that effort, and I can tell they did. It just wasn't something that worked for me. Speaking of which, let's talk about the less fun side of this episode, which is not a fault of the episode itself. The reaction from some people. Killing Macho Man, as I've explained, was something I wasn't a fan of, and while the episode's attempt to make it less brutal actually did the opposite for me by making me imagine it myself, the episode put in the effort to try and make up for it, namely the bit where the two fist-bumped and act as if this is normal for them. Yes, on the extremely unlikely chance that someone like Larry Poffo comes across this episode and watches it, there is a chance that the portrayal of his brother's death in such a brutal way could be very distressing for him. However, it is very unlikely that he would show up and come across the episode, and it is possible that he could end up loving it. For all we know, he could see the episode, and due to the decades since Randy's death, he might realize, he wouldn't realize, he'd know, but he might see this as just another example of how his brother's influence was so big that 20 years after his death, there are still people celebrating his life. And this bit at the end is almost heartwarming. And yes, this episode was celebrating his life, not tarnishing his legacy. Now some people, not naming names, have apparently begun to vilify, demonize, and antagonize the people who worked on this episode. Partially because, oh no, they did a chest-based death on a guy who died from a heart attack, which was definitely 100% not intentional. I have no doubt in my mind that this was just an unhappy coincidence. If they really wanted to do a heart-based death, they could have had Kool-Aid Man fill his heart with Kool-Aid and burst it. But no, that's not what they intended to do, so they didn't do it. Nobody who made this episode wanted to make fun of, insult, or make light of Randy Savage's death. There was no intention to do anything malicious in relation to Randy Poffo or his family. And anybody who thinks there was is just going too far.
It's nothing!
This is the sort of shit that people criticize Seth the Programmer for doing. You know, when he took things from Zuko vs. Todoroki and seemed to believe the writers were actually pedophiles. People criticized him for that. And now they're doing the same shit! Making jokes about the way Zuko was talked about was at least fine, but the topic of Randy's death is not. Don't make jokes about Death Battle actually having something against Randy, and don't genuinely say it either. They do not. As a friend of several people who work on Death Battle, including the two researchers for this episode, and having talked with the writer herself, I can say from knowing them that they never once wanted to do anything malintended to Macho Man Randy Savage. Please, if you intend to harass anybody on the team, make jokes about them killing Randy, and that being because they hate him or something stupid like that, or if you try to say the episode is awful because of bullshit reasons, because you can't wrap your head around the concept of just saying, I personally didn't like it and that's my opinion, then don't do something stupid. For keep in mind, the people who work on this series, they're still people. They're still people. When you go and you start berating them, demonizing them, and doing shit like this, you're doing what they did to Justin Bieber and Rebecca Black. And that's not okay. If you dislike Death Battle, that is fine. If you dislike the team, Well, I'm not the opinion police, so I can't exactly say you're not allowed to, even if you're wrong. But if you attempt to go around saying Death Battle are evil, bad, and otherwise malicious because they killed Randy Savage, only to have him come back and act as if this is something he and Kool-Aid Man do normally, then please, shut the fuck up. And yes, I know Wiz says the Kool-Aid Man is nothing like Randy has fought before, implying that this is the first time that they've ever encountered each other, and that was likely the intention as nobody corrects him, but shush. I can interpret it how I want, and otherwise they are still on good terms here. I don't find this episode generally middling because it killed Randy Savage in such a way. I find it middling because the Boomstick's family drama is completely uninteresting to me and took away from the budget that could have been used to make the fight a bit more varied and longer. Yes, this is my least favorite death, unless that one is counted, because personally I didn't think it was necessary. But I'm not going to vilify Death Battle over it, because this is not something worth vilifying Death Battle over, and not something you should reasonably be able to. They didn't have to do it, but they did. But even in spite of that, they put in the extra effort to lessen the impact of it. This was a project of passion, of love, but not spite. How petty, how stupid do people think the team for Death Battle are, thinking that their big anniversary, 150, would be a spite episode? These people love the show they work on. They put love into this, and I can't fault them for that. Sure, as an episode, it's a 6 out of 10 to me. But as episode 150, as an anniversary, as a special episode, it's a 10. It's a 10 out of 10 in that regard. Because what else can I give an episode with so much passion, love, and work put in? Just because it doesn't work for me, doesn't mean it doesn't work for others. And we should be glad that a show we love this much has people who care so much about it. People who are willing to put their all into making something they want us to enjoy. For all the faults and issues, what matters is that I can't say anybody was lazy. I can't say nobody gave a damn. From the editing to the animation for the fight and analysis, from the stop motion segment to the unique conclusion, ending, and analysis, from the track by There With Media to the loving references to past episodes. I do think this episode was a success in that regard. Not all experiments work, but what matters is they gave it a go. To try but not succeed is better than to not try at all. And in this case, I still liked it. I still enjoyed the overall project. A 6 out of 10 is not a bad score. It does not mean that it was bad. It's above bad and it's above neutral. It's a good episode. I just didn't think it was a great episode. But people need to stop harassing the creators for unintentional parallels. I'm sure no matter what they did, people could have come up with some stupid connection. Oh no, they had Kool-Aid Man kill him with brute force. This must be a spiteful referral to the car crash involved in his death. He got dissolved in Kool-Aid. Oh no, this is clearly a relation to how he was cremated. There is always something stupid you could say no matter what the death was. So instead of saying something stupid, why don't we just appreciate the work that went into a special episode for a show we love so much? And that was my piece. That was my look at the joke episodes. And yeah, season 2 still has my favorites. But in spite of that, there are very few joke episodes I think are bad past season 1. There's really just Deadpool vs. Pinkie Pie, and hey, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hate that I had to go on that little tangent at the end there, but I feel like people have been a bit harsh, and by a bit harsh, I mean way too harsh on the people who worked on the episode. Can't fault them for something they put so much effort. I mean, you can, I did, but you can't insult them, attack them and shit for something they put so much effort into. I still like the episode. A 6 out of 10 means I still liked it. I mean, I guess I get why some people wouldn't like it. Fair, and I think that it was a bit overhyped, and too much was revealed. But, I mean, hey, that's just how it is sometimes. But most importantly, I can now safely say people who defend Boomstick Dan jokes because they lead up to something with a big payoff can shush. Surprisingly, this B-plot that I didn't enjoy did not retroactively make every past Boomstick's dad joke hilarious through the power of magic. I, in fact, do not go back to older episodes and go, wow, suddenly that joke where Boomstick says, Papa, is not miraculously hysterical now. If you're fine with the jokes or you think they're funny, that's completely okay. But just say that instead of, oh, it's just leading to something with a big payoff, it's okay. Just say you're fine with the jokes or you think they're funny. That's so much simpler, and I can't even deny that. I'm not gonna be like, no, you did not find that funny, sir. Or ma'am. Or neither. You did not. Alright, bye.